Welcome again to Summer Tomato Live. If you've never seen the show before, welcome. It's usually a closed show because it's usually for my premium newsletter subscribers to Tomato Slice. But this week, I'm celebrating because probably a lot of you found out about me for the first time yesterday because Time Magazine called me one of the 50 best websites of 2011, which is so awesome. I can't even believe how awesome that is. So that's really exciting, and so I wanted to give all the new readers and viewers an opportunity to come see the show and come say hi, and I'd love to get to know all of you because we have a really awesome community here at Summer Tomato. So this show is actually going to be a little bit a different format this time. Normally I choose like a very big, or not me, but the subscribers will choose a very big sprawling topic like soy or salt or fat or weight loss and something. So I, usually spend about half an hour covering tons of science and giving you point-by-point tips on what to do with this different information. But today I'm trying to keep the show a little more concise. So I think an hour is a long time for a lot of people. So I'm going to try a little different format tonight, just answer a few shorter questions and move on and then take questions throughout the show. So feel free to interrupt me whenever with questions. And we have a moderator today who will help us make all that happen smoothly. And that's it. So let me see if there's any other announcements to make. Right, so who am I? I'm the host of Summer Tomato Live. My name is Daria Pino, and I am the creator of the website Summer Tomato, which is a website I started a couple years ago for healthy eating tips for food lovers. And all those things are really important to me. I think healthy food's amazing. I think that it should be easy to do, and I like to have easy to digest tips that you can take home and implement immediately. And also, I think you should love food. And whether you want to get healthy or lose weight or just maintain a healthy life, I don't think that should be a sacrifice at all. So I'm all about having good food and being healthy and loving every second of it. I'm a huge foodie. So if we have any, also Summer Tomato is also where you can go if at any point during the show I tell you I'll link to something in the show notes. So I'll go ahead and do that when the show is released. Well, I'll probably release the YouTube version of it sometime next week, and I'll go ahead and have all those links for you at summertomato.com then. And it'll be on this exact same post, the same URL, so you can come back to exactly where you are. Awesome. So what I did this time was I put together a couple questions that I get asked all the time. And I think they're really good questions, and so I just want to answer them for everyone so that you can all benefit from the answers. So there's a couple, the ones I picked I think are pretty great. The main theme today is processed foods, and then I have a little bit of kitchen tips at the end. But so the first question that I wanted to answer is somebody asked, what is the deal with processed foods? Why are they so bad? And this is a great question. So one of the things I talk about the most on Summer Tomato is to stop worrying about diet food, stop worrying about fat and carbs and all this stuff, and just stick to eating whole, natural, unprocessed foods, preferably seasonal ones from the farmer's market that taste really good because they're in season and because they're grown by people who really, really care about their product and not like on some giant industrial farm on the other side of the world. And one of the reasons that I recommend that is because of all the data I've seen, and I've been researching this stuff not researching myself, but reading about this stuff, and I have a background in science, reading about this stuff for years, and I could never find anything convincing that any particular diet was better than the other diet, but unanimously across the board, processed food seems to be bad for us. So what's up? Like, what is it about the processing? So there's a couple issues here. One is that we don't know. I think the best explanation of the processed food issue that I've read was by Michael Pollan, and this was in his book, In Defense of Food. And if you haven't read Michael Pollan, either The Omnivore's Dilemma or In Defense of Food, they're excellent books. I highly recommend them. And he does a very good job on describing, thank you, James. He does a very good job on describing why it is that whole foods are important. But he admits to himself that it's very difficult to say what exactly it is about the processed foods that are bad. But I have a couple of my own theories that I've seen sort of coming out in the science and in the scientific literature that I think are worth speculating on. And I'm not claiming that any of these are like absolute the reason, but maybe a combination of these reasons. And they're just things to think about as to what the problem is. So the first issue is, and this is sort of the most obvious place to go with this question, is that food processing for certain kinds of foods, it fundamentally changes the molecular structure of food. So the perfect classic example of this, of course, is trans fat. So if you don't know the biochemistry of trans fat, which is fine, what happens is basically food scientists figured out that you can take, that saturated fat is great for making pastries and baked goods and stuff like that because it's solid at room temperature, right? Think about what happens if you put a cooked steak into the fridge, or even just let it sit out. It'll congeal, bacon grease will congeal, and it's solid at room temperature. And that really results in a very nice consistency, actually. But people were very scared of saturated fat for a long time and decided that it would be much better to use plant oils instead. And the brilliant biochemists in the lab figured out that if you start with plant oil and you do something called hydrogenation, what that does is it chemically alters the bonds that create a fat molecule, and it makes the plant oil have the same properties as the saturated fat. The problem is it also creates this other chemical. While it's making some version of the saturated fat, it also makes this other chemical called a trans fat, which is something that almost never occurs in nature. And apparently, and nobody really knows why, our bodies really can't deal with trans fat. They're really, really dangerous. There's no safe amount of trans fat that you can eat. And this is really scary, right? Because they put this stuff in everything. And so while we don't know why our bodies can't deal with it, we know that they can't. And so there's some fundamental problem with changing the molecular structure of food to turn it into something else that basically becomes like a poison to us. So that's one issue. And it's not this is not restricted to hydrogenated fat. So another thing that is very common in food processing is something called hydrolyzing. So if you see hydrolyzed soy protein on an ingredient list, basically what that does is they're taking a different process and they're taking a protein molecule and smashing it into all of its amino acids, which is what the building blocks of a protein. And while this is very convenient for a food processor, it actually forms MSG. So that's another example of how you start with something benign and you process it in some weird way and it physically changes what you're eating. So that could be a huge reason that processed food is bad. That we're just basically not adapted to eat these like weird things that are now in our food. But when you think about it, when you're doing that, you are not just adding new weird things to the food, right? So the second part of my point is that when you're changing the fundamental structure of food, you're also taking away some of the good stuff, which is also a problem, right? So when you think about a whole food, like an apple or a bean or a piece of steak, it's not just fructose, which is, the main sugar in an apple, and vitamins, and it's not just protein and starch in the beans, right? What you actually have is thousands of different molecules that are in very specific ratios that make up that food. And this goes for the steak as well. It's not just protein and fat. Like, it's lots of kinds of fat, lots of kinds of protein, tons of minerals and vitamins in meat. People like to overlook that. So we don't understand yet at this point how all those molecules and all those nutrients interact with each other in the ratios they do when we eat them and put them into our bodies. So if you think about, let's say, high fructose corn syrup, right? So everybody just sort of assumes, and I mean, we pretty much know that it's really bad for you, right? People say maybe it's not worse than sugar. So sugar is another example of the exact same thing. You're taking something that's naturally found in food, extracting it, and putting it in a weird in a weird state where it doesn't have all the normal things it has around it to balance it out, and is highly, highly concentrated in one form. So it's not necessarily that the fructose is bad. Like, I wouldn't go so far as to say fructose is bad, but at the concentrations that we're getting it, that might be a major problem, especially if you take away all those buffers that may help your body deal with that molecule. Does that make sense? So it's something that we really don't know. And when I talk about concentration, I want to reiterate how important that is in chemistry and biochemistry in general. Very small changes in concentrations can result in huge differences to how your body interprets something. So eating high fructose, like the same amount of food over a long period of time, has an incredibly different effect on your body than if you eat it all at once. So that's the sort of thing that we're dealing with here. And so unfortunately, there's not a better answer than that. There's a lot of reasons that processed food could be really bad for us. And these are just a couple of them that some people are sort of exploring, scientists are exploring. But I think it'll be a couple decades before we actually have all this worked out, like at least. But the good news is, the good news is that we don't need to know exactly how this stuff works to make the right choices, right? So we know that processed food is bad. We don't know why. Hopefully one day scientists will enlighten us and figure that out. But in the meantime, just avoid that food and stick to the good stuff. So I believe this was Shannon who asked this question. I hope this helps a little bit, but I'm sure it's unsatisfying, and we would all love a better answer, but we're going to have to wait on that. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is a question that someone sent me, asking if artisan breads are as bad as grocery store breads. And then they specifically asked about the Ezekiel 4:9 unleavened, unbaked breads. And there's a lot going on here. So there's a lot to this question. I really like this question because it sort of gets down to the crux of what I think is important in when you're making your food decision. So if you sit down and you talk to a nutritionist, and this is almost across the board, like hardly anyone is going to like look you in the eye and tell you that bread is a healthy food. Somebody might tell you it's not that bad. Some people will tell you it's super bad, but nobody's going to be like, yeah, you should eat more bread to be healthy. That's just not like, no one believes that. The data is too strong against it. So the question that we're dealing with then is a matter of degree. Well, how bad is the bread, and how much of it can you eat, and how unhappy will you be if you have to give it up? So I think these are all really important questions. And so if you're a healthy person and you're not looking to lose weight, I think that the potential nutritional deficiencies that some people claim are associated with bread are mostly irrelevant and pretty easy to overcome with other habits. So if you think about like what the issues are with bread, so like one of the main arguments that I hear against bread is that the carbohydrates will basically turn directly into blood sugar in your body, and you'll get a spike in blood sugar and a spike in insulin, and somehow this will cause heart disease and diabetes and stroke, and then you'll die. But is one piece of bread going to kill you? No, right? It's not. And then some people argue, well, humans were never evolved to eat grains. It messes up your gut. You have really bad, I should have probably taken some questions on that last one. I'll get to that in a second. It messes up your gut, and it has all these other problems, but and some people are intolerant to gluten, and all these things are totally important if you have specific conditions. But the question is, if you're a healthy person and you take good care of yourself, there are, if heart disease is what you're worried about, there are a zillion things you can do to protect yourself against heart disease. You can eat more vegetables. You can exercise more. Even drinking alcohol protects against heart disease. There's a lot of things you can do that have a huge impact on reducing your risk of heart disease. Whereas a piece of bread once or twice a week is going to have a very little impact on the negative side. So the way I always look at this is look at your situation and decide for yourself. If you're mostly eating healthy, I think it's perfectly fine if it works for your health and your situation to have bread. It's not going to kill you. And it's fun. I mean, a pizza every now and then is great. A sandwich every now and then. Like, I would have trouble living without that. And I know some people don't. They're totally happy being totally carb free, and that's awesome. Good for them. But I don't feel like that's something to be super proud of yourself for. Because personally, I think there's a just as great of a value of being a social person and hanging out with your friends and enjoying the things they're enjoying. And if you don't enjoy that, that's one thing. But I don't freak out about this stuff. Aim for bigger goals, the bigger picture, and then make your selections, pick and choose about where you're going to make those little indulgences and how much it's worth it to you. But the important thing is the baseline overall food you're eating. And then there's one more point I want to make about bread, and that's the fact that when you talk about artisan bread and grocery store bread, you're talking about two different beasts. And I actually am a little nervous and I get worried about grocery store bread, and this is the soft stuff that comes in the plastic bags in the bread aisle. Next time you're at the grocery store and you're thinking about buying that stuff, take a look at the ingredients. It's terrifying. It's like this long. It's a paragraph like this long. There's dough conditioners in there. There's preservatives in there. There's all that weird stuff, the processed foods that we don't know what they're doing to our body, all that stuff, that's in that bread. But a baguette that's made with flour, water, yeast, and a little bit of salt, none of those things particularly scare me. Some flour scares some people. It only scares me a tiny bit. So I think there's a huge difference between artisan and the processed preserved breads. So that is my take on breads. And, if you are having issues with digestion or anything like that, sure, it's worth cutting out for a few weeks to see if there's any improvement. But sorry, screensaver keeps coming on. But if not, then I would say just stick with what works for you. Sweet. So I'm going to pause. I've got one more question I'm going to answer from my subscribers. It's the topic of the show, but I'm going to answer some reader questions right now. So this is interesting. Lisa Purple wants to know, do seasonal fruits and vegetables help with our immune system, specifically for that season? I haven't seen any research on that. That's actually a really interesting question. I've definitely heard that local honey can help with seasonal allergies in your area, which is pretty exciting. The nice thing about fruits and vegetables is if you're eating a broad array of different things on a regular basis, you're getting so much good stuff that you're really covering all your bases, and even the parts of our body and immune system that scientists don't even know about yet. I'm sure there's hundreds of things that we have no idea about our immune system, and this one magic chemical that one day, like in 5 years, everybody will think is a superfood because it's in a zucchini or something, will be touted as magical. But, if you just eat a good variety of all that stuff, you're getting it all. I found that when I changed the way I ate, I didn't get sick for like 3 years straight. It was amazing. There's a couple other things I do. I take a multivitamin and I take vitamin D, but not even a sniffle. So yeah, I have if you go on a Summer Tomato, I have a whole article on how to avoid getting sick in flu season with different tips and tricks for staying healthy. It includes things like washing your hands, not touching your face, but also there's some nutrition tips in there. So you can check that out. Awesome. I'm going to take this question about bread because it was on the topic. So what breads, baked goods made at home? Oh, what about breads made at home with ground almonds instead of flour? So almonds is completely different. So that's a seed or nut instead of a grain. So if you are gluten-free, that's a totally awesome option. Can you actually make bread out of ground almonds? I've never seen that. I know you can make like a chickpea flour bread or something like that, which is cool, but I haven't heard that. But I mean, yeah, it's certainly a good option. I mean, especially if the people who talk about the dangers of gluten and the less lectins and the anti-nutrients really, really freak you out, then I think it's worth trying. The problem with that is like, I mean, you still have that social issue, right? You still can't go have pizza with your friends if you're only eating almond bread. But, you know, if you want to healthify your home a little bit and something you want to eat regularly, it's definitely worth experimenting with. Almonds, yeah, I'd say definitely almonds are healthier than flour. I feel comfortable saying that. So, great question. Here, this is a good one too. What types of foods in general do you recommend for people allergic to yeast, gluten, and wheat? Pretty much everything except bread. I mean, a great substitute, and this is how one of the reasons people speculate that Asian cultures are healthier is rice. You know, it's a great starch to have on your plate. I would eat brown rice, but even white rice isn't that bad. Actually, white rice hasn't been shown to be correlated with most of the sort of Western diseases that people like to blame on carbohydrates. So that's definitely a good option. But there's tons of grains out there. There's a lot of great gluten-free blogs too. That if you're like a pasta fan, I mean, you can make your own gluten-free pasta. Check out Gluten-Free Girl, her Gluten-Free Girl and the Chef. That's a great gluten-free blog with tons and tons and tons of awesome recipes. But generally, I mean, I don't eat a lot of yeast, gluten, or wheat anyway because most of the things I eat are based on vegetables, fish, meat, and I eat a lot of legumes like beans and lentils because I love them and I just find they're just an awesome substitute for super starchy starch, and I just think they're great. So that's what I would do, and that's what I do. And then I just have like the occasional sandwich or whatever when I'm not in the house. I rarely eat. I never like buy bread for home. Like every once in a while, like I make that bruschetta that I posted this week, but not that often. So I'm gonna scooch on over back to the other question actually. And before there's a couple more questions in the queue, but I just want to spend a little time in this last one. So someone asked or said that she loves my idea of cooking more healthy food, but that she just started and it's taking up way too much time and it's really overwhelming. And she wanted some tips on how to deal with that better. And I like this question because it shows a lot of ambition. I think it's a great step to make. And I think it's something that has some pretty simple answers I think I can really help with. So my first piece of advice for anyone who doesn't really know how to cook, but who's first getting started in the kitchen and trying to cook healthy and buying all these weird vegetables and trying to cook them, my first bit of advice is to just keep at it because you'll totally get better at it. When I first started, the hardest thing was like cutting up an onion or something like that. But, it would just take a while and, then you had to cut something else and it just seemed like so much work. Now I can like blow through all my cutting in like 3 minutes. And seriously, I can almost do it with my eyes closed. It's so fast. And that just comes from practice and time. So, keep at it. If you really want to enjoy yourself, go invest in a good chef's knife. It makes a huge difference. It's really fun, actually. And you're like, how did I ever cut with a crappy knife before? Because this is amazing. It really changes your kitchen experience. And it makes you feel like a chef, like builds your self-esteem up a little bit. So that's a great investment. The other thing I recommend always is don't be too ambitious when you first get started. If you're just starting shopping at the farmer's market, and if you're just starting to find the glories of fresh, delicious, seasonal produce, you'll be blown away at how little you have to do to it to make it taste good. Most of it tastes good right out of the ground. So start simple. Don't you pick recipes with like tons of crazy ingredients, and just do simple things. You don't every dish doesn't have to be 10 ingredients. Start by making one pot dishes. That's another good tip. Instead of three separate side dishes and a main course or something like that, try making one pot dishes and then just sticking on like 3 or 4 ingredients to get started, and just take it slow. And eventually, I hardly ever do more than 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 ingredients on a weeknight when I'm busy and I've got a lot to do. Maybe on the weekends I'll be a little more ambitious and make something a little fancier and open a bottle of wine and light some candles or whatever, but that's not necessary. And, if you're just getting started, it's going to be more frustrating because you're going to have more to clean up. It's going to take forever. There's more things to mess up. You don't really need to deal with all that. Wait until you get good with the knife and then move on from there. And the last thing you can do to save some time is, I do this all the time, is to make big batches of things and use it over the course of the week. So I like to make, I never cook rice for one meal. I always make it for like 10 meals. And if you search rice for dummies on Summer Tomato, you'll see how I make rice. I don't use a rice cooker. It's really easy. It takes like 15, 20 minutes. And I freeze it in individual servings, and they defrost in the microwave in like a minute and a half, and they're perfect, beautiful steamed rice right there. And so that takes a ton of my kitchen time away. I do the same thing with beans and lentils. I don't usually freeze those, although you can. I have instructions on Summer Tomato for that too. But I usually eat them so fast that freezing them is pointless. But, I make a big batch once or twice a week of either lentils or beans, and I just keep that in the fridge. And whenever I want to add them to a dish, they're ready. So that's a huge time saver. And I was actually my dad recently just changed his diet, which is the awesomest thing ever. He just started eating really healthy, and he used to eat really unhealthy, and I'm really happy about this. But what he's been doing is doing this with stir fry, which I've never tried. I always make stir fry right on the spot, but he'll spend a little more time on one day and cut up tons of vegetables and cook 3 whole batches of it and just like fill up this giant pot, and then he eats it all week. And then he supplements, like he'll add, one day he'll have salmon with it, or one day he'll have chicken or turkey or something. And, but that's to reheat it and add that little protein takes him hardly any time at all. So there's lots of things you can do to save time in the kitchen. And those are my intro beginner tips that have saved me the world. And yes, I'm very busy. When I was just a year ago, I was a full-time grad student trying to finish my thesis, my PhD, running a blog full-time, and trying to have a social life. And I was totally broke on top of all that too, still am. So, time and money are important, but they shouldn't be a barrier to healthy eating. I'm proof you can do it without those things. So great questions, everyone. Okay. I'm going to move and take some more questions. Boink. So this is interesting, Edward. Is it true that too many antioxidants can actually be bad for you? So this word antioxidant, I do not think it means what you think it means. So it depends on what you're talking about specifically. So there are certain vitamins, most vitamins are antioxidants. There are certain vitamins that are, your body will hold, and you can poison yourself on them. Vitamin A, you can easily poison yourself on vitamin A. Be careful with cod liver oil. And a few of the B vitamins you can have too much of for sure. So, and actually I've even seen cases of some woman, it was a case written up in the New York Times a year or 2 ago. A woman had eaten, she was worried about osteoporosis, and she heard bok choy helped, which I don't know why she heard that, but she was eating tons and tons of raw bok choy, and this chemical from the bok choy built up in her body, and she was hospitalized. So yeah, don't go nuts on one thing, but I've never heard of all the antioxidants being too high. You know what I mean? If you're I've never heard of, I don't know what that would be. The only issues that I've heard about are with supplements specifically, where you're taking too much of something, or when somebody does something which is similar to it taking a supplement, which is eating the same food over and over and over and over and over again. So yeah, I don't recommend doing anything over and over and over and over and over again, generally. So because what your a much better goal would be to try to get a wide array of different antioxidants. There are probably hundreds of them that are valuable to you in regular doses. So great question. Just take a few more. I don't want to go too far over this time. I'm trying to make the show shorter. Someone's asking about sugar alternatives. I'll take it real fast. Generally speaking, I've talked about this before in some past episodes. I don't remember exactly which ones, but generally speaking, I don't see the value in these things. Generally, I think they taste bad. I've had some samples of Stevia and Truvia sent to me. I didn't enjoy it at all. The main issue I have with it, though, is that what you really want to do is stop yourself from craving sweet stuff and to get your body recalibrated to normal tasting food, which, you know, it's a process to do that. Once you do it, it's awesome, and you would never go back to like super sweetened stuff. If you're talking about the occasional indulgence and you're wondering if you should substitute fake sugar, I would say why bother? If it's just an occasional indulgence, it won't make you any less healthy. It won't stop you from losing weight. I would say just eat sugar and just understand that it's a treat. Don't go nuts and enjoy it. So so that's my biggest problem with the Stevia and Truvia. I feel like it's psychologically not a good idea. And possibly, you know, there might be some physical stuff. I've never seen any bad reports on Stevia, but doesn't mean nothing would ever be bad. I don't know. I'm just generally not a fan of sugar substitutes. But, you know, in relatively small amounts, if you like it, it probably won't kill you. I hope it won't kill you. Oh, so Kevin Poirier. I answer this question every week. So you might want to check back some old episodes really fast since I want to cut this episode short. I recommend relying more on green leafy vegetables because they're super cheap. Even the fanciest organic farm in San Francisco, which is expensive, kale's like $2. So is the bulk section that has beans and rice, and you just cook it yourself. And they're really cheap, and you can do them as a grad student. I lived on it for years. So I have all sorts of these tips over on Summer Tomato. So search around Summer Tomato, watch some of the old videos. I have a specific post on 10 tips for saving money, and I'll add all these links back when I put this on YouTube next week. So good one. I get it every week. I should write a book about that. Let's see. Ooh, I'm going to skip the breastfeeding one today, but come back again. I hope you do. That's an interesting question. It's a little more complicated though. Oh, and then the next question is about osteopenia, and I don't know about that either. Sorry, guys. If you want to ping me, we can talk about maybe me looking into those things for you. But generally, I talk about general stuff. So I think I'm gonna stop there. Thank you guys so much for joining. Oh, one more question. I like frozen vegetables. I think they're a great alternative if you can't get anything else. They're high in nutrients. I mean, they're not going to taste quite as good as fresh stuff, but, you know, sometimes they do. Like, frozen peas are pretty darn good. So, yeah, I think they're one of the best sort of packaged foods in the entire grocery store. All right. I'll hold office hours again, and the office hours are always open. So come join me again next time at Summer Tomato Live. In the meantime, if you guys are interested in subscribing, and what I do for subscribers is, and this is to Tomato Slice, my newsletter, which if you want to sign up, the URL is down there, tinyletter.com/summertomato, and it's free for a month right now, normally $3.99 a month. But what I do is basically it's an email list, and if you're on the list, you can ping me anytime you want with nutrition questions, and I will take time out of my day and answer them for you. And I'll even help you look into more complicated stuff like the osteopenia if you're interested. So that is the purpose of the mailing list. I also send out extra content every now and then, just little thoughts and tidbits that doesn't make it all the way onto Summer Tomato. So it's a little bit of extra content. Also, you get access to the live shows. So I would love more subscribers if you guys want to sign up at tinyletter.com/summertomato. In the meantime, I will be back next week. Not sure what the day is yet. Hopefully we're doing an interview, but I haven't scheduled that. My schedule's a little off right now, but I should know more soon. So I will email everyone and let you know. Thanks everyone, and see you next time.